It is week number 5, the final weekend of September, the 2025 college football season, and it's your week 5 pregame show live right here on Big Ten Breakdown, all a part of the I-80 Club. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. If you've been following the show at all, if you can see this visually, you would know that we are playing an away game like the reigning national champs in Ohio State, like Indiana on the road inside Kinnick Stadium this weekend, and many others in a away game, but it could not stop the Week 5 pregame show here on Big Ten Breakdown. It was such a great weekend to end out the month of September in the Big Ten Conference as that conference action intensifies with so many great games. The game of the week in college football, the game of the week in the Big Ten, and so many matchups that will tell us so much about these teams still early in 2025 and beyond for the remainder of the campaign. Of course, we had to deliver this pregame show to you bright and early on a Friday, entering your weekend for week number 5. Make sure, as always, that you are following, you are liking, you are subscribing, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever that might be. And of course, if you're joining us visually, you are seeing this away game background on YouTube. We appreciate it there. All the great content that the I-80 Club is doing, Jack and Josh, around Nebraska sports, some NFL content I have seen as well. We're getting ready for week number 4 of this National Football League season. Jeff and Lincoln for the number 1 team in the country, the Nebraska Cornhuskers in volleyball, who are absolutely obliterating opponents early in Big Ten play as well on Volleyball State. You can get all of this great content advertisement-free, patreon.com/I80 Club. That is I80. All right, it is week number 5. Only 6 matchups for us to break down. Some teams with an open weekend. But I've said this numerous times. I'll probably say it transparently a few more times throughout this college football season. Week number 5 is my favorite Saturday so far of this college football campaign, and certainly in the Big Ten, a game that we all had circled very early on as we looked at the 2025 slate. What we have on Saturday night in Happy Valley, the whiteout game, and a top 10 tilt between Penn State and Oregon, but a ton of other great games as well, like an upstart Washington team, fresh off a rivalry win in the Apple Cup against Wazoo, now welcoming the number 1 team in all the land. And of course, the best damn band in all the land, and the reigning national champs to Seattle, that being Ohio State. Top 25 matchup for Illinois and USC, who makes a statement on Saturday. Indiana made a statement last Saturday against the Illini. Can they continue where IU left off on the road in Kinnick Stadium? What about Rutgers and Minnesota, both looking for some resilience and a bounce-back spot? And of course, UCLA and Northwestern as well. So let's dive right in. Our Big Ten breakdown game of the week. You could bet what it's going to be. It's the game of the week in week number 5. It's the number 3 team in the country, Penn State, hosting the number 6 team in the nation in Oregon. It's the 18th ever full stadium whiteout game inside Beaver Stadium. Capacity, well more than 100,000 people. And Penn State is 11-6 straight up in the previous 17 whiteout games on quite a notable win streak right now, entering the 2025 rendition as well. And this is the game that we have been waiting for, specifically for the Nittany Lions, but also for the Oregon Ducks, whose resume so far entering week 5, much more stellar than that of Penn State at this moment. This is the game for James Franklin in year number 12 in 2025, entering this season with national championship aspirations, where we were going to know everything we probably need to know about Penn State this year. This is that game, because the first 3 matchups for the Nittany's haven't really told us all that much. And it's a really interesting thing to go into a top 10 matchup and not know all that much about one team based on this year's sample size as compared to 2024. But that is part of the reason we are so high on the Nittany Lions entering this year, because all of that returning talent and production from a season ago, setting the stage for this year to finally get to that ceiling of expectation. And this is your golden opportunity. But with those golden opportunities, of course, come with some disadvantages and come with some big scar tissue that Penn State has dealt with in these exact significant spots. Under James Franklin, 11 previous seasons, Penn State is now 4-20 against AP top 10 opponents. We take that even further into conference play. They are 2-17 against Big Ten AP top 10 foes, with both of those two victories for Penn State against top 10 opponents coming back in the 2016 season against Ohio State in late October, in the regular season against Wisconsin in that Big Ten championship game. This just the second ever whiteout top 10 affair in State College. The first one back in 2018 against Ohio State. What a game it was for the Buckeyes, trailing by multiple scores in the fourth quarter, to come all the way back to pull the hearts out of the chests of those 110,000 basically inside Beaver Stadium. That's all that we have built up to this game. We know the Ducks have been dominant on both sides of the football. Oregon has the second best scoring margin in all of the sport, plus 166. Oregon, one of 5 teams in the nation who have scored more than 150 points so far this year, and defensively have allowed fewer than 50. The other 4, Texas Tech, Indiana, Mississippi State, and Florida State. Oregon has been incredibly steadfast on both sides of the football. We know more about Dan Lanning's team entering this matchup in State College than we do for Penn State. So if we don't know a ton about the Nittany Lions this year, what is that key matchup that we are looking for in our Big Ten breakdown game of the week? To me, it's not so much a matchup. It's an individual. It's a player. And if that's going to be the case, it's a quarterback. It's Drew Aller. What does Drew Aller have in these spots? Because it's been a story for Aller in his career, now his third year as the full-time starting quarterback in State College. It's been the story for James Franklin, faltering on these occasions. Aller has played 10 ranked opponents in the starts that he has made for Penn State. The averages are not very pretty, 166 yards per game and a 54% completion percentage. Against top 10 foes, it's 8 touchdowns to 3 INTs. In general, against ranked opponents, it's 14 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He's not necessarily turning the ball over, but there is no rhythm. There is no flow to the offense with Drew Aller so far in his starts against ranked foes in his career. And now it's a 10-game sample size, including pretty limited performances and wins against Boise State and against SMU in the college football playoff. But if we're thinking about Drew Aller against the best of the best, our mind harkens back to the CFP semifinal. And when Penn State needed a drive, it was Drew Aller throwing an interception, leading to that game-winning field goal for the Irish, sending Notre Dame to that national championship game. So my key matchup is my key individual. It's Penn State's quarterback in Drew Aller. You have all of the experience. You have all of the tools. You've learned, we think, from your lumps to be in this spot, to change that narrative, to perform well, to throw for 225 plus against this Oregon team, and lead the offense for Andy Kotelnicki and Penn State to a victory on Saturday night in State College. It would go a very long way for the Nittany Lions to change that direction of this program, to stop talking about big game James Franklin, and to solidify its quest to be a true national championship contender. Because conversely, if the Nittany Lions falter in this matchup, especially at home, booked as a 3.5-point favorite against Oregon, we are going to rightfully have our questions about if Penn State will ever get to that ceiling. They could be a college football playoff team. Heck, they could rally from this and play in the Big Ten championship game. But as we shared at the 2025 prospectus for Penn State before this season started, it's not about getting to the college football playoff anymore or even winning a few playoff games. It is reaching a national championship, beating the best of the best in doing so, and trying to bring that national championship back to State College, Pennsylvania. Our Big Ten breakdown game of the week, the 18th ever full stadium whiteout game, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time inside Beaver Stadium on NBC. Number 3, Penn State. Number 6, Oregon. The Nittany Lions, an ever so slight 3.5-point home favorite. The time is now. But the Ducks have been dominant. I think we're going to get a football game of all football games on Saturday night in Happy Valley. Our next category for our next games is the follow-ups in the encores. Let's start with what Indiana fans are hoping is a complete encore on Saturday afternoon inside Kinnick Stadium, when the number 11 team in the country now, Indiana, travels to take on Iowa in Iowa City. 47.5-point total, 8.5-point spread in favor of the Hoosiers. 3:30 p.m. Eastern time kick, streaming on Peacock. Oregon has that second best scoring margin in the country, plus 166. Who has the best? It's Indiana, plus 186. The Hoosiers have been dismantling opponents. And of course, when you win by 53 a weekend ago against a top 10 foe, it's going to be good. IU ranked 11th. It is the highest Indiana has been ranked in the month of September in the AP poll since 1969. And we are wondering what Indiana is going to do for that follow-up, what the Hoosiers can accomplish in this encore. Indiana as a favorite, laying more than a touchdown here inside Kinnick under Curt Cignetti. So since the start of 2024, 15-0 when they have been booked as a favorite. When the Hoosiers have been expected to win a game, they do, and they often win by a ton. A perfect 15-0 with an average margin of victory of 36.9, nearly 37 points per game. You might have seen some comparisons last week to last year for Indiana. The market was loving the Hoosiers in a spot that not many people were understanding why, like early in the season against Nebraska. Why is Indiana being so bet heavily against last year an undefeated Cornhuskers team, this year a top 10 team in the Fighting Illini? Didn't seem to make a lot of sense, and hand up, didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me either. Indiana beat Nebraska last year 56-7. What did they do in an encore? Even losing Curtis Rourke for that game and starting Taven Jackson, they still won by 2 touchdowns. That is IU's task. But this is a different scenario. This is in Iowa City. This is in Iowa. It's inside Kinnick Stadium, where the Hawks are feeling pretty good as well, coming off a road victory on a Friday night in Piscataway, scoring 38 points. Mark Gronowski 3 times into the end zone himself. And Iowa hasn't often been a touchdown or greater underdog under Kirk Ferentz, and certainly not in the last decade. Just 10 times has Iowa been catching at least a score, a touchdown at home under Kirk Ferentz since 2014. Only 5 times. In those games, the Hawkeyes are 4-1 against the spread with 2 outright victories. What does that mean if you don't know the betting jargon? That Iowa should keep this game within a single possession and keep it close. That's what Iowa does. To me, the key matchup in this game between IU and Iowa is strength on strength. For Iowa offensively, that's their rushing offense. Still averaging 200 yards per game, one of 6 Big Ten teams to average at least 200, as is Indiana. IU is the best rushing offense right now in the Big Ten. In Indiana's defense, as we have shared, that front 7 under Bryant Haynes has been sensational this year, causing havoc, getting to the quarterback. They've also been pretty good stopping the run since their opening week, only allowing 2 yards, counting all 7 of those sacks last week against Luke Altmaier. 2 rushing yards in total against Illinois, 7 sacks and 10 TFLs. So that will be a key. Can Iowa establish the run behind one of the best offensive lines in college football? Indiana did allow the mobile quarterback of Old Dominion, Colton Joseph, to break off 2 touchdown runs of 75 and 78 yards and gave up 218 yards in total in the 3 games since. The Hoosiers have allowed a total of 130 rushing yards. So easier said than done, but that will be a key for Iowa to keep pace in this game. Can they keep up with a high-powered Hoosiers offense? But if you saw Iowa's pass defense last week against 8th and Kaliak-Manis, allowing more than 300 yards, you might expect our Heisman frontrunner and favorite in Fernando Mendoza to have himself a field day inside Kinnick Stadium. So strength on strength. Can the Hawkeyes defense, which each and every year, especially in the secondary, has been so great under Phil Parker, but looks a little bit leaky here early in 2025, can they contain Mendoza and that lethal Indiana attack? If so, and they establish the run and can keep pace with scoring some points as we have seen this year, I think it's a 1-possession game. If not, I think Indiana continues to prove that when we are booked as a favorite, we leave no doubt. There is no consideration on if we are a good team. We hammer opponents, and they hammer opponents by so much often, you question how good the opponent is. Stop doing that for Curt Cignetti and Indiana. As we talk follow-ups and encores, of course, Indiana in the rout last week of Illinois. What do the Illini have for a bounce-back spot at home in Champaign? Big noon kickoff, 12 p.m. Eastern time on Fox, and a second consecutive top 25 matchup for the Illini, hosting number 21 USC. The Trojans booked as a 6.5-point favorite. We'll talk about that in just a moment because we want to see that resilience out of Illinois. And that's what Brett Bielema teams have done in his 4 years as the head coach in Champaign. Illinois 18-11 against the spread as an underdog. Obviously did not cover last week with 12 outright wins. When they have been overlooked, that's when they rise to the occasion. But all of the matchups in this game, much like they did last week in Bloomington, favor Southern Cal. USC has an incredibly havoc-wrecking defensive line, 16 total sacks this year, tied for the most in FBS college football. What has been the issue for the Illini? 7 sacks given up last week against IU's front, 16 sacks in total. That is tied for the most among power conference programs alongside Auburn. All right, check mark. That goes to USC. Illinois allowed 579 yards of total offense last week and were gashed both on the ground and through the air. All right, well, enter Jaden Mayava, who has more than 1,200 passing yards, 6th most in the country, the best passer rating in the sport, even a couple of ticks in front of Fernando Mendoza, in a ground game right now with Wayman Jordan, the JUCO transfer, who has been sensational for USC. Advantage Southern Cal. And yet, this feels like a spot. One, because of the timing and the travel here. Listen, you're not going to really feel poorly for coaches who complain about start times when their athletic department is making nearly 70, 75, $100 million per year based on joining the Big Ten, because the economic dollar was the reason we had conference realignment in the first place. But Lincoln Riley, rightfully so, because he doesn't control these things, bemoaned the idea that they ended their game nearly at midnight local time last week, basically on Sunday morning, and now have a short turnaround, flying to Champaign to play in a 9 a.m. Pacific time kick. It's not easy. So it feels like that spot. And again, a 6.5-point spread in favor of the Trojans. You would probably think that number is only going to get more and more. 80% of the betting handle on DraftKings, 80% of that public handle all over USC. But the line opened at 6.5. It's remained at 6.5. In some of the sharper sports books that are only in Las Vegas, so you got to walk up to the window to place a wager, like Circa, open the line at 7. 59% of that sharper money is on the Fighting Illini, and the line is worked to 6.5. I do think Illinois keeps this a one-possession game. Who wins? I'm not entirely sure, but I do think we see some resolve out of the Illini, who did get some bad news confirming Xavier Scott, the all-Big Ten defensive back last year for Illinois, is going to miss a considerable chunk, if not all, of this season. Miles Scott, who was ejected for the opening half targeting call last week against IU that I did not like because it was in the first half, can play from the very jump, and they will need him to contain that lethal passing attack of USC. Again, all the matchups favor Lincoln Riley's club. There is no doubt about it, but it feels like a spot for Illinois to find that bounce back, show that resilience, and keep this game close. All right, next up, our next category. There is so much to be learned on Saturday in the Big Ten and really in these two spots. We'll learn a lot about all the teams that we have already mentioned. There's no doubt about it. We're going to learn about that resilience of Illinois. We're going to learn if USC is a bona fide Big Ten contender, can handle this situation to take advantage of the football X's and O's and win. There's no doubt we're going to learn if Penn State is national championship caliber. We're going to learn if Indiana continues to be that wagon rolling over everybody. There's no doubt about it. But these two games specifically feel like we have so much to learn about these teams, and we'll see it fully on display on Saturday, including the number one team in the country and the reigning national champs in Ohio State as an 8.5-point favorite in Seattle against Washington. Firmly inside Husky Stadium. It is going to be beautiful. On the banks of Union Bay, high above Lake Washington, a gorgeous Saturday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. in the Pacific Northwest on CBS. Of course, we learned a lot about the reigning national champs at home, taking down the preseason number one team in the country in the Longhorns. Since, it's been Grambling, Ohio, bye week here. Ohio State, best scoring defense in the country, as they were a year ago, tied alongside BYU, who also in only 3 games has allowed just 16 total points. Ohio State was the best red zone defense in the country in 16 games. They only allowed a total of 16 red zone touchdowns. So far, only 4 red zone trips against this Matt Patricia Buckeyes defense, and 0, not even a field goal, 0 red zone scores. That is going to be paramount for Washington to take advantage. But this Washington team, to me right now, is being slightly overlooked. I think at least by AP poll voters, I was stunned that UW was not put into the receiving votes category of the Week 5 AP Top 25 after their dominant performance, certainly shutting out Wazoo in that fourth quarter 28-zip to pull away in the rivalry matchup on the Palouse away from Seattle to win the Apple Cup. Washington has been great on the ground with their backfield, with Damon Williams Jr., the quarterback, and the nation's leading rusher when it comes to touchdowns with 9 in Jonah Coleman, 260 yards per game in average. That is 9th best in the country, 2nd best in the Big Ten. And Damon Williams, I think, deserves a little bit more national attention and will be a key spot in this matchup against that Buckeyes defense. But when you have the performance that Williams did in that rivalry game against Wazoo, 16 of 19, 298 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, was UW's leading rusher, 13 carries, 88 yards on the ground, and a score. So nearly 400 yards of total offense in 5 total touchdowns. You are in full command of that Jetfish system that has been incredibly productive and prolific for Washington. So, of course, that is the focus in the key matchup. Will there be a spy for Damon Williams in this Matt Patricia defense that, hand up, I was skeptical of entering this year? Would Jim Knowles to Matt Patricia and the play calling take a step back for this loaded and talented Ohio State defense that really won them a national championship a year ago? No, it hasn't whatsoever. Jake Butt, who, of course, does some great work for Big Ten Network, the former Michigan tight end, I saw he had a masterful breakdown about how he expects Patricia to use the all-everything guy in Caleb Downs, who's probably the best defensive player in the country, not named Ruben Bain at the moment, to spy Damon Williams, because he has the speed to keep up with him in the open field to make some of those big plays, to stop big plays on the other side. And if Damon Williams is just in the pocket, stepping back to pass, then Caleb Downs can get back in the secondary and do what he needs. A couple of other guys that are freak athletes, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, how will they be incorporated in this role to keep Damon Williams slowed down? And you're going to hear that UW's defense is not great. Well, based on last year, maybe so, and they allowed a lot of points to Wazoo and even to Colorado State, each at least scoring 21. But Ryan Walters, who's the new defensive coordinator of the Huskies, has done some really good things. Last week against Wazoo, 28 yards on 27 rushes for those Cougs. Can Washington's defense keep them around, and can Damon Williams make the plays that are going to be necessary against this Ohio State defense? And we'll see what Julian's saying, who has the 3rd best passer rating in the country, only behind Fernando Mendoza and Jaden Mayava, a couple of points right in front of the guy that he will be playing on Saturday in Damon Williams. How does that look offensively for Ohio State? I think it's a great game. I do think the Buckeyes went on the road. Washington has won 22 consecutive games at home. It's the nation's 2nd longest active home win streak, only behind Georgia, who currently stands with a tough matchup in between the hedges against Alabama on Saturday night with a 34-game home win streak. I do think Ohio State wins. I think the number 1 team in the country, as we want to learn a ton about this team, proves they are the best team in the nation in this tricky road spot in a wonderful home environment for UW. I do think the Huskies keep it within a single score. I think we have a great game, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. Just already hearken to the image of the CBS college football theme. Bam, ba-da-bam, ba-da-ba-bam, playing as it goes over Union Bay on Lake Washington into Husky Stadium. As good as it gets. As good as it gets. Our second game, and there is so much to be learned, is Rutgers and Minnesota. Noon Eastern time in the Twin Cities on Big Ten Network. These two teams both hoping for a bounce back. Minnesota had the bye last weekend after that disappointing Cal loss in Berkeley. Darius Taylor, who was injured against Northwestern State Week 2, did not play against the Golden Bears. Is he going to be back for the Golden Gophers? That's a key for me. This is also the Ethan Kaliak-Manis revenge game against his former school, right? Where he has gone to Piscataway and developed into a quarterback we did not see during his time in Minneapolis. 1,150 passing yards, 10th most in FBS college football, 7 touchdowns to only a single interception in a costly spot late in the second half last week against Iowa. But that Rutgers offense is rolling. 7 straight games of 30-plus came to a close last week, but they still posted 28 against the Hawks. Minnesota has been great defensively under first-year DC Danny Collins, who, of course, has a ton of familiarity within this program. They are the only team so far in FBS college football to allow fewer than 200 yards per game on average. only $177. They're also the best rushing defense in the sport, just a tad over 41 yards per game. But Jaren Kiabe Sangu-Polutelli, Cal's true freshman quarterback, performed really well, 3 touchdown tosses against Minnesota in that loss week number 3. So it's not as though Minnesota has been ironclad. Can Ethan Kaliakmanis in that Rutgers offense have the same success? It is a critical spot for both of these teams to get to that 7-8 win margin that they are both flirting with, I think, here in 2025, especially for the Scarlet Knights, because after this game in Minneapolis, they have a bye, then it's a road trip to Washington, Oregon on the docket, Illinois, Ohio State, Penn State. Rutgers, the only team in the Big Ten that plays all 3 teams that had the preseason win total in this conference of 10.5, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. And oh yeah, sandwiched in between those 5 incredibly difficult tests is a Purdue team that looks a little bit spunky and a Maryland team right now that's perfect 4-0. So a really big game for Rutgers to continue to add on to the 3-0 start after dropping the home game against Iowa last week, and a big game for Minnesota if they want to get to that 8-win threshold to bounce back. I tried to get all the injury updates I could on Darius Taylor. I'm not sure we have a ton about his status. We'll wait to see what that looks like on Saturday morning ahead of the noon Eastern kick in the Twin Cities. Our last game of 6 in the Big Ten Conference this weekend is maybe not the sexiest football game we will ever see, especially with all of the great games that we have around the country in college football week number 5, and even here in the Big Ten Conference. We're going to call this category Fresh Start. Fresh Start, because it's UCLA winless on the road at the Lake against Northwestern, a 1-win football team, winless against FBS foes and 2 tries so far. The Cats are a 6.5-point favorite. Total is 44.5, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time kick on the shores of Lake Michigan on Big Ten Network. Of course, this is UCLA's first game post Deshaun Foster with Tim Skipper, the new interim head coach. He has a lot of experience as an interim head coach, coached the entirety of 2024 at Fresno State with that interim tag. How will this team look? When Tim Skipper took over in the bye week for the Bruins, he said this is basically training camp. It's basically fall camp again. Then we'll get into game prep. Was there enough of a reset, both culturally, mentality-wise, for UCLA throughout the stretch run of this season? Northwestern in those 2 losses against FBS foes have not looked particularly competitive. They lost by 20 in New Orleans against Tulane, allowing 269 yards on the ground. They were shut out against Oregon, down 34-zip until the final 6 minutes or so of that contest. They gave up 179 rushing yards to the Ducks. UCLA, conversely, has allowed at least 30 points in all 3 games this year. One of my main questions for this game, call it a key matchup, if you will. The Cal transfer in Javian Thomas, who was a big deal, not quite Nico Iamaleava a big deal, but Javian Thomas was a big deal for the Bruins offensively this year. He's not their leading rusher. He does not have the most attempts of even running back so far. In this transition now to Tim Skipper, Tino Sunseri, still the OC, calling plays. Will Javian Thomas be more part of a focal point of that game plan? Last year at Cal, 626 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. Can that be a key against the Northwestern defense that at front has struggled to contain the ground game of its opponents so far this year? Because after this, of course, UCLA will host Penn State, then on the road to East Lansing against Michigan State. Northwestern's schedule is not easy in the Big Ten. This could be one of the prime opportunities for both of these schools to get a win in conference play when they will probably not be favored to win many more. I doubt the Bruins are favored in any other games this season. I'm not so sure the Cats are favored beyond this matchup against UCLA. They're laying 6.5. Both teams in desperate need of a win. Who gets it on Saturday at Martin Stadium? Those are 6 matchups for Week 5 of the 2025 Big Ten season. It is one of the great weekends of college football, both in this league and beyond around the country. Thank you for bearing through this road game here on Big Ten Breakdown. You are now ready for week number 5. A reminder, make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Do the same on YouTube if you are tuning in and watching along. And make sure you are following I-80 Club on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok I have seen out there. Do all of it. Big Ten Breakdown, the Week 5 pregame show. You are now ready for the most consequential weekend, the final Saturday in September so far in the Big Ten Conference. And of course, coming Monday morning, following this show on Friday morning, a recap of everything that we have seen. The post-game show, week number 5, comes your way on Monday. I'm Ben Stevens. Thanks so much for joining.